Welcome back to Anxious Faith. I'm James Burke. Today we're hearing the story of Keola, a young guy from Las Vegas in the US who thought he was living the dream. He was scouted out of high school for a Division I baseball college and on his way to making it as an athlete. But moving to that college wasn't the highlight he was expecting it to be, and instead it became a time of anxiety, fear and dread. Even after returning home and moving to a different college, Keola found his mental health challenges only worsened, culminating in a season of significant mental ill health where he dealt with some pretty heavy things. So as a word of warning, Keola's story does cover his struggles with self-harm and suicide ideation. So please be wise as you listen and mindful of who you're listening and watching with. Despite his continuing mental health struggles, Keola's testimony is one of immense hope. Through his darkest periods, he has experienced God's grace and deliverance in incredible ways. And while those struggles have never entirely gone away, he's able to proclaim the goodness of God in all circumstances. He shares his story today with the prayer that it might bring hope to anyone suffering through similar circumstances. So here's Keola. We're chatting with Keola today. We are really excited to be chatting to him, but I do want to flag from the outset that he's going to be sharing his story, which involves talking about anxiety and suicide ideation and self-harm. And while we won't be speaking in any graphic detail about those things, it can be potentially something that might impact people. So please be wise in choosing to listen to this or choosing how or where you listen to this or who might be around while you're listening. If it's too much for you, please don't feel like you need to listen. We'd prefer everyone to be in a better headspace than potentially listening and making life more difficult for them. So that said, Keola's story is a really encouraging one. It's not a story that is finished by any stretch of the imagination. None of ours are. We're always all going to be on a journey to some degree. But Keola has a really amazing testimony of how he's seen God work and encouraged in his faith to be to this place now where he's speaking openly about what he has dealt with and still deals with today. So Keola, thanks so much for joining with us. Why don't you just start and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, thank you. So my name is Keola. I'm from Las Vegas, Nevada, here in the United States. And yeah, I really just have a passion for God and a passion for mental health. And so just very happy to be here and tell my story.
Yeah, fantastic. And that's what I love is that you even though you're someone that's dealt with some pretty hard stuff, like you're quite passionate and open about talking about it, which is amazing. And love that openness and vulnerability you share. So yeah, let's kind of jump into your story. And why don't you start us kind of from the start of your mental health journey or what kind of contributed to it?
Yeah, absolutely. So really growing up, I had two amazing parents. And so my mom has been working in the church for about 20 years. And so grew up Baptist, and then my dad was a captain firefighter for his life. And so really just two very supportive, very faith-driven parents that I absolutely love. And so, and then of course I have an older brother who we're very close to now. And so, but yeah, really my story started there. I really got into a lot of sports when I was young, football, baseball, and basketball. But around 10, baseball took the lead. And so really where it starts is 10 years old. I made the all-star team for the Little League, which was a big deal at the time. Mm-hmm. But on that team, one of the coaches, his son was playing for a club ball team. And he pulled me aside one day and said, "Hey, you should try out for my son's team. I think that you'd be a great asset on that team. And we can just play a tournament to see how it goes." And I was also on a club ball team at the time. I think that's like right when I started getting into club ball, travel ball. And the team that I was on, we weren't that very great, but it was really fun. I was playing the game that I loved, and it kept me out of the house, so I'm sure my parents were happy about that. And so it was just good. And so after All Stars, I play on this team, and I try on this team, and really this paints the perfect picture. So I'm playing first base. I'm left-handed, which helped in baseball. And so I'm playing first base, and we're about to win our first tournament. So I've never won a tournament, I don't think, since then. And we have only one out left. So we have one strike, two strikes. And after the second strike, our second baseman looks at me and he says, "Hey, are you ready to win your first championship tournament?" And I was like, Absolutely. Like I was thrilled. And so I was just waiting to jump around and look. And so the third strike goes, strike three, we win the game, we win the tournament. I'm just ready to jump up for joy and look around and like dog pile or what. I don't know what you do when you win. And, they all just put their head down, kind of jogged off, and as if it was business as every other day. And that's when I learned that this is a pretty good team. And so that was really my first success, taste of success.
And baseball became a big part of your life then from then on, didn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I pretty much dropped, every sport, I believe, and really just focused on baseball after that. And so really it was just practices and, practices with my dad, on the off time. But really, so I want to paint a picture. And I say this not to ever boast, but really just to give God the glory, but also paint the events leading up to really my first experience with mental health, with anxiety and depression. And I think it's important to highlight the highs, and then that shows how hard the downfall for me was. And so, at 10 years old, or in sixth grade, at the end of sixth grade, with this same club ball team, we went to a tournament in Cooperstown, New York, where that's the MLB Hall of Fame. And so there's this huge tournament. I believe when we went, there was over 100 teams, all within the nation. And we get to stay in these dorms, and you dress how they did, like in old school. So the pants were high, and you have striped. It was fun. And we ended up winning the whole thing. Wow. And so that was just amazing. And so there was all the teams that wanted to stay watched. And so there was probably 500 to 1,000 people, maybe a little bit more. And so that was a really cool experience. I think the trophy was bigger than I was at that age. Like it was really cool. And so and then from there, fast forward into high school, my sophomore year, I was decided to pitch. So I never really pitched before this. I kind of did on and off, but really I played first base and center, because the positions are limited when you're left-handed. And so I was playing at first base and center, and I was like, okay, I'm going to try pitching. And I think the coach was like, yeah, I mean, why not? Right. And so I remember I was practicing probably, a week or so, practicing pitching, getting comfortable with it. And I went into my first game. I think we were already down by 7 or something like that. We were getting crushed. And they're like, okay, Keola, you're in. So I went in. There's a runner on first. And, I remember I was like, okay, just breathe and throw a strike. And so I threw my first pitch. It was a ball. I was like, okay, got that out of the way. The jitters are gone. Yep. And so I was like, okay, the next pitch, home run. The guy absolutely crushes it. And I was like, well, can't get much worse than this. So I was like, okay, let's just have fun. Next batter comes up, first pitch, home run, back to back home runs. And I was like, I'm never going to be a pitcher again. And so didn't think anything of it. I got out of the inning, got out of the game. And I was like, okay, at least that was behind, right? Like I tried it.
I've given it a go. Yeah.
Exactly. And so, but the thing was, after the game, for the next weeks or so, the pitching coach still wanted to work with me. And so from there, we developed different pitches that I didn't really have. And I forget how long it was after that first experience, but I remember I was putting on my cleats for practice one day, and the pitching coach walks by and he said, hey, he goes, you're starting next week. And I was like, okay. And I didn't think anything of it. I was like, all right, I guess we want to lose. No, I was like, okay. I was like, we'll give it a try. And so, and then I remembered, I was like, wait, that's our rivals. And I said, hey coach, I was like, we're playing so-and-so, right? He goes, yeah. He goes, what? You don't want to pitch? He goes, I get it after that performance. I understand. I was like, no, I want to pitch. I was like, give me the ball. And so he's like, okay. He's like, show up. Like, let's see what you can do. And I happened to have, the best game. And did super well, and that really started my pitching career. And so from there, I ended up finishing the year, and then I got a most valuable pitcher on our team at the team banquet. I got to go to the All-Star game, and so that felt really good. And going into, so that was my sophomore year, my second year, and at this point, I was gaining enough traction. And that's when scouts start to look at you, your junior and senior year, so your last 2 years. And so I felt really good. And then we go into, my junior year, so the following year, And there's a pre-season tournament that we play, and it was a doubleheader, so we had 2 games back to back. I pitched the first game, and then the coach was like, "Okay, great, you did a good job. I threw a lot of pitches. I think I did the whole game." And he said, "You're sitting the next game," and I was like, pause. So I think this is how in my mind it went. This could totally be false. So if my coaches look at this somehow, I apologize. But this is how I thought of it in my head. And so I was like, no, there's no way that I'm going to sit. Like, I have to play. And that was just more the competitive nature of me. And so he's like, no, like, you just threw a bunch, like, we need you for the year, X, Y, Z. All very logical things to say. And I was like, no, I want to play. So he's like, okay, how about, he's like, you can hit. And I was like, no, I'm playing. And so I was more respectful than that. But I was like, no, I'm going to play. And so I was like, coach, because I was playing center field. So I was like, if I get the ball, I will literally underhand it to one of the other outfielders. Like, I just need to be on the field and be a part of the team and play. And so I ran out and I'm playing center field, and there was base runners on first and second, and a base hit. So ball gets hit right to me, and all instincts just take over. Like, I'm a backseat to my instincts, and I just charge the ball like I've done 1,000 times. I get it, and I'm throwing. So in my mind, I'm throwing home, all I have, and so my shoulders are squared, and I'm throwing, and then at the last second, I know the runner's going to be safe, and so I heard the third baseman call to throw it to him, and so I made last second adjustments. Well, my elbow was going from a proper position, and then it led all across my body, which is super unnatural. And as soon as I threw it, there was three thoughts that went in my head consecutively. One was, that was probably the best throw of my life, which he was out. So I was like, heck yeah. 2, I was like, that felt kind of uncomfortable. And then 3, I was like, my coach is going to kill me. And so I was like, I'm thinking of all of this at the same time. I jog in, and soon enough, I didn't need surgery, thank God, but I was out. I had to rehab the rest of the year. So I didn't even get to pitch that year. And I got to hit, but I was not focused, and it was just hard. And so that was hard. So I couldn't perform in front of the scouts, anything like that. And also I could have taken a gamble and come back the end of that year, pitch, and then maybe do well, risk injuring it all over again, or not fully healing. Or what I ended up doing was just rehabbing it the whole year, be careful with it, and then just really bank on having a really good senior year.
Yeah, and you did have a really great senior year, didn't you? You ended up being scouted and offered a Div 1 spot. Is that correct?
Yeah. So I ended up playing in California at a Division 1 school, and that was the whole dream, right? And so I just remember once I had that offer and we communicated with the coach, I just realized that all of those one more pitches and one more, at bats and one more drill, all of those paid off, and it was a dream. And so for me, I was like, that is incredible. And also too, I had a lot of support, and I liked a lot of the players, and I just had a lot of people telling me that, I was going to be successful. And nothing crazy like I'm going to go pro, but you're going to be successful. And so I felt that, and it was a really good thing. It was a really good feeling.
So yeah, take us through that and what that was like. So, moving interstate and, all of a sudden now playing at a much higher level.
Exactly. And so it was about 5 hours away from my hometown. And so it wasn't too far, but it was perfect enough where I was doing my own thing, and I was also doing what I loved. And also my parents could visit me if they wanted to. It wasn't hard. And yeah, so that year, I was really, also one thing that I do want to mention is it's what convinced me that I was going to be this professional baseball player. So my senior year, we have this tournament, again in California. And so, we played there, and there's a lot of good talent in California. And so there's always scouts there at those games. Well, I pitched at one of those games and, did well. And then so I come back from that tournament a week later, and at one of the games, my coach pulls me aside and says, "Hey, someone wants to talk to you." And I was like, okay. And so I went over, and he introduced himself, and he said, "I'm a scout for the Boston Red Sox, for Boston area." And there's multiple scouts, degrees of scouting. And so it was like the basic, just let's get in contact type thing. But I was like, wow, this is amazing. I was like, a little colder than I thought, but yeah, I could get used to that. And so I was like, this would be awesome. And so that experience in high school, my senior year. Fast forward, now I'm at California playing baseball, and one practice, I'm jogging into the dugout, and right above the dugout, I see him, the same scout. And I was like, it's meant to be. I'm gonna play. I'm playing for the Red Sox, right? And so that really, like, that gave me a lot of confidence. I was like, okay, I'm meant to be here. I'm doing my thing.
You're there. You're riding high. You're kind of, on the way to living the absolute dream of everything you think that's gonna happen, but clearly you didn't make it to be a pro ball player. What happened? What happened that year when you were out there?
Yeah, so I think it was a combination of things. One, I was away from family for the first time, which really wasn't too bad. It really is it's a whole different animal, Division I baseball and high school. Because really, if you think about it, it's all of the best players that were in high school are now consist of the whole team in all of college. And so it's motivating, absolutely, but also it was a big shift, and really anxiety grabbed a hold of me. And that was for the first time I really had it when trying to understand all of the different signs and different plays that we do. And so I had a hard time with that. And then really from there, I just got so far into my head, because I wasn't performing the best I could, and trying to remember all of those signs. And so it got to the point where really I just had so much anxiety, just even going to practice, being on the field. It ended up being, after a while, the worst part of the day. And that's what I'm going to college for, but education. But I was going to play baseball. And
can you describe what that was like? Like, what was going through your head? What were you feeling in your body when you were out on the field, and all of a sudden this is now the worst part of your day?
Yeah, it was absolute dread. I would say a lot of fear, a lot of panic, making sure that I get the signs right, making sure that I'm doing the right plays. And then I got so far into my head where I knew what the sign was, but then I was like, surely I misread that. And then I would end up doing like the opposite sign. And so it was all like psychological warfare in my mind. And if I would have just taken a breath and just said, hey, you're okay. Like, this is the sign. But my mind was spinning a million miles per hour. And, I knew every time I stepped on that foot, on the field, that I was going to experience that in one capacity or another. Wow. And so really it was just trying to survive those hours, which I was on the field 6-7 hours a day.
Wow. That must be a really confronting thing to go, hey, I'm living my dream to some degree, or I'm on the way towards living my dream, and now this is the thing that is actually causing all this anxiety and dread. Yeah, how did you cope with that?
I didn't. I think that's the honest answer. What I did do, and I think because I one thing that really messed my head up, and it was the best intentions of the coach. I put no blame or fault on him at all, but we were having practices, and I had a really good practice one day. And I remember the pitching coach came over, and the pitching coach was the one that recruited me in a sense. And in front of all the other pitchers, he says, hey, he goes, you're this close to being something amazing. And he scouted very, very good professional players that had successful careers in MLB. And so he said, you're this close. And I am not going to lie, that statement has haunted me for a long time after that. Nothing that it's not, he was encouraging me. He was doing all the right things. But that just really stuck. Cause then when I went into pitch in games, there was crowds of, sometimes hundreds of people there. And every time I went on the mound to pitch in a game, it was just bad performance after bad performance after bad performance. And then soon enough, I just had no confidence. I think that's what it was. I had zero confidence as a baseball player. I had zero confidence as a person. And then from there, I didn't know how to cope. And so, I couldn't drink alcohol. One, I was underage, and two, drug testing. And so, and I was just, I didn't have time really just between the schedule. And so I didn't really cope with that. I guess really caffeine. It was one of those, which it seems, unorthodox, but really for me was I wouldn't sleep. And so I would feel very groggy, and then I would drink caffeine to feel good. But then of course that cycle, played into the downpour. And so really, I just didn't have the tools. I didn't know. I didn't speak up and say anything. And so I think that also played a part into it, because I believe that they would have at least, had me talk to a psychiatrist or psychologist or something. But I didn't know the words to say. And also too, it's the culture of it too. Baseball and you just don't. You're in the sport of, and all sports are, solving equations. Whatever comes your way, you solve it. You figure out a way how to do it. And that was something that was unsolvable. And I didn't have the tools. And so it was really hard. And then what would then end up being my saving grace, which was bad. But I remember I got so low, I had the thought of, if I just injured my arm, I would have no expectations. I wouldn't have to play. I wouldn't have to practice. Like, that's how low I was. And I remember I was pitching one day in practice, and I was throwing a curveball, and I felt sharp pain in my elbow, and which is really unfortunate. I remember the first thought was, oh, this might be my ticket. And it ended up being, I didn't need surgery or anything, didn't need Tommy John. I needed another surgery, or not surgery, but it's called PRP, which is something with the plasma, which is really interesting. So that senior year, when I threw all of those pitches, really my body said to my elbow, since you're going to damage it again, we're just not going to repair it. And so, or we're going to repair it less. And so what happened is that the plasma, they essentially put the plasma back in, and it rebooted my body to say, hey, no, we need to heal this. And so that ended up being a 4 to 6 month recovery. And that was enough time to get me at the end of the season.
So yeah, you get injured, which, from a objective position, you go, oh, that's terrible. But in your mind, you're like, yes, this is my ticket out of having to deal with this anxiety, this dread, this psychological weight I'm dealing with every single day. So what happened when the season ended then? Was it like, okay, I'm free, I'm out, or is there still some stuff going on?
Yeah. So I remember I met with the coach, and he said, you know what? We're going to send you back home. There's a community college that's right next to my house, and they also are a really good program. And so he goes, you know what, go play there, build up some confidence a year or two, and then we'll be happy to take you back. And so there was always a good, at least on my end, a good relationship. And so in my mind, I don't know, I would venture, I think immediately in that moment, I was like, I just need to go home. But I think there was a part of me where I was like, I can go home, I can, regroup and then play at this junior college and then bounce back. And so I get home, and I was just so relieved. And I was like, okay, I'm home. I can breathe. I'm in a place that I'm comfortable with, that I know. And then really about a week, I don't know the exact timeline, but a little bit after, the wave of anxiety, of social anxiety and depression hit for the first time. And that was I have two big encounters with mental health, this one and then one we'll talk about later on. But that was the start of it, and it came in nightmares. So I felt the same anxiety that I was on the field at night, and I don't know if it was just my brain trying to process it now that I was in a safe place, and I really couldn't face it in reality. And so I think at night my brain was like, okay, we have to do something about this. Like, clearly this is here. And so so I would wake up in panic attacks. Wow. Which I had no idea what that was. I just knew I woke up and I was in a fight or flight. And eventually over time, and that was the interesting part that I give my parents so much credit for, that I probably don't say enough, is that it was new. Like, mental health really wasn't a thing that, at least in my family, that we dealt with. And I would even say, like, in generations that we dealt with. And so they're learning, I'm learning. And they gave me a bunch of grace. And I'm very thankful for that.
So what did you do then, and how did your parents help you in that time?
Yeah, so I just remember the first wave of really experiencing the panic attack. One thing that really helped me over the course of experiencing this, because this lasted about 2 years, 2.5 years. And in the beginning, it was really, I woke up, I was in a panic, and what worked for me is I had to scan my room to make sure I'm safe, to tell my mind I'm not back in California. I'm in my bedroom. I'm safe. And then I would get up, and then I would just walk around and really just taking note of the environment. And that really helped. It helped calm me down. Now, this would happen at 2, 3 in the morning. And so naturally I was like, well, I'm pretty hungry now and I'm up. So I would just go to the kitchen and have cereal or something. And, love anything about space. I think it's fascinating. So I'm just watching, like videos about black holes, like in the middle of the night, and eating a bowl of cereal. And then I remember my dad came out one time, and he was like, it was the first time, he was like, what are you doing? Like, he was worried. And I was like, oh, I kind of explained it to him. He's like, okay. And then eventually from there on out, he'd come out, if he, get water, whatever, in the middle of the night, he'd come out and be like, you okay? I'm like, yeah, I'm good. He goes, okay, let me know if you need anything. And it didn't happen like every night, but just when it did. And so that was the panic attacks. Anxiety attacks were a little bit harder. Those lasted typically anywhere from like 30 minutes to a couple hours. And really what was hard about that, so anybody that has an anxiety attack, they know, that was terrible, but it was the hours, I would say even like 30 minutes to hour after the anxiety attack, it just felt as if I was just waiting for the next foot to drop. So it just felt like there was something there that I could spiral back into, and I was either trying to find it or it was going to find me. And it was just a hyper sense of anxiety and waiting. And then once that kind of dissipated, I was okay. And then also another thing that I experienced was just the social anxiety, even with my parents. So even with people that I love, there'd be times where I'd wake up, in the morning, and I wasn't hungry, so I didn't go out for breakfast. And then by that time, a couple more hours go by, and I don't go out for lunch because I'm thinking, well, I didn't go out for breakfast, so now like they're gonna say something, like they're clearly worried, they're gonna say something. I can't talk to them now. I don't even know the words to explain what I'm feeling, and I just don't want to have that conversation. And then lunch passes, and I'm like, well, now I miss breakfast and lunch, so surely I can't go out now. And then just the same game and same cycle would happen. And, sometimes it'd be a whole day. And then in my mind, I'm like, I would wait until they go to bed, and I'm like, okay, now I can go out and get a snack, or some waters, or just whatever it was. Or I would wait until, they go out to lunch, or they go shopping, and then I would go out and have a meal. And again, it wasn't that every day, but it was a lot more than, I ever thought it would be. And so it was just kind of balancing that over the course of two years.
Yeah. Which is, you talk very candidly about it, but, in the midst of that, I can imagine that that's a pretty horrific existence to be living. What was faith like for you during that time? You're saying you've grown up in church, your mum served in church for years and years. What did this do to your faith, or did it raise any questions for you in your faith?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, like I said, grew up in the church, loved it. Really didn't have any problems or qualms with it. And I think that just really shows the love that my parents had for me and my brother. It was never forced, but just seeing how they lived and just loving them, it's like, I trust this. And so, in high school, I wish I could say the same. It was not. I did some things that I probably shouldn't, and I didn't do enough things that I probably should. And so there was that balance. And then really getting into, so after going into college and then coming back, it was rocky, I would say. Ups and downs. The one thing that I did, I never blamed God. I never was angry at him. I think for me, in my case, I was just trying to survive. Yeah. And so, it was a lot of, probably please help me and make this go away and make this stop. But I never really blamed him or yelled at him. But I wasn't reading the Bible. I would listen to worship songs, and I would pray fairly consistent, but, it was hit or miss.
Yeah. So I mean, that's amazing that it didn't lead you away from your faith, even though you're dealing with these things. But like, it's a long, a couple of years is a long time to be dealing with that level of, you know, mental burden. I don't know how else to put it, but are there things you found during that time that enabled you to process or help or work your way through it?
Yeah. So funny enough, the one thing that did help was writing. And I say funny enough because, I never was really interested in it.
Okay.
In fact, there was one time in middle school, I remember I had a class, I think it was an English class or writing class or something that I had with a lot of my friends. And we had to write like an open prompt, and then I had to share it that day. And then I remember the teacher pulling me aside and said, "Hey, like you're a pretty good writer. Like think about taking this seriously." And I was like, "Okay." And so I was like, "I'll never do that." And funny enough, that was the one thing that really helped. And it wasn't so much so in the beginning, it really wasn't journaling, which there's nothing wrong with that. I do that now. It was actually just the process of writing. So even just taking my time and articulating letters, I think it was just enough break where it shifted from all of my thoughts and anxious thoughts and depressive episodes to then just doing something that's else. And so for whatever reason, that writing really helped. And then throughout that process, I felt God put on my heart and say, "Hey, how about let's write to an audience? Like, how about you write as if you're talking to somebody?" And I was like, "Okay, that's pretty cool." And then he also put on the project of really just writing your experience, what you're feeling. And so I ended up writing these just one page, and I would just write kind of my mood or thoughts that I experienced. And it's actually really cool. Throughout the whole process, I then have about 130 individual writings that kind of tailor through the beginning to the middle to the end. And so that helped tremendously. And even through that, I was able to draw closer to God in that process.
That's amazing. But like you said, there was two kind of main seasons in your life where your mental health took a real dive. And we're going to chat about the second one, which in some ways got even worse after the break.
Hi friends, I'm Maddie, the writer and editor on our team. I hope this episode is speaking to you as much as it did to me. September is Suicide Awareness Month, and in honour of that, we'll be sharing the stories of people with first-hand experience of suicide. Whether they've lost someone to suicide, helped someone navigate that dark period, or have struggled with suicidal thoughts themselves. It's our hope that these stories will open up conversations around a sensitive topic that needs to be talked about more, especially within the church. Our team has also put together a suicide resource page to help us all be better equipped to think about how we can be supporting those struggling with thoughts of suicide, whether that's you yourself or someone you know. On that page, you'll find information and videos covering topics such as how to create a suicide safety plan, where we see suicide talked about in the Bible, and how to help someone who's struggling. To read, listen, or watch these stories, as well as access helpful resources, please visit anxiousfaith.org/suicide. Finally, if you or someone you know is struggling with thoughts of suicide, please speak to someone. You'll find a list of Australian helplines on our website, or if you're in another part of the world, a quick search for Suicide Helpline Near Me will get you your local number. You don't have to go through this alone. Now let's get back to the episode.
Keola, said before the break that there was this second period in his life, or a second wave of his mental health really going downhill, which was pretty bad. And that's where the suicide ideation and the self-harm come into his story. And while we don't want to glorify those things, we also don't want to shy away from the actual experience of what people are dealing with. There is a power in speaking about the experience of what people go through for those who might be dealing with the same thing and may not know that other people have been through this too. And that's why I'm so appreciative that Keola is so open. Keola, why don't you tell us about that kind of second wave of mental health when, you really started to struggle again?
Yeah, absolutely. So this was in 2021, 2022. And at this point, I am away to another university, not playing for baseball. And so I go there, I graduate from there, and then I end up staying in that state. And I found a job in in mental health, and it was from an eating disorder recovery center. And it was incredible work. The dietitians and therapists and all the people that I got to work with and even become friends with, it was amazing what they were doing. At this time, through personal reasons and just really being away from family too. My brother just had a baby in the end of 2021. And so I became an uncle, and it was just really hard to not be there and, seeing the family group chats of pictures of her growing up. And it was really hard. And so I was just really, really struggling. And what I realized is that the further that I was sinking, the atmosphere of which I was working, there was also a lot of suicidal ideation, some self-harm, some really co-occurring disorders that happen with eating disorders. And I always thought, I was like, there's no way, like I can always separate work from my personal life, no matter how bad that this personal life is going or what it may be. Like I'll never bring work home, etc. And it was at that point where it was a very low. And I just remember I was like, this needs to stop. And so my thoughts were just racing so much. Anything that you could think of, just, you're not worthy. You shouldn't be here. All of this, just the position that you're in right now is your fault. You're so far away from family. You're never going to see your niece grow up. All these different things, just constantly on a loop. And, I was like, it needs to stop somehow. And I was already drinking a lot, way more than I should have. So that was also contributing to this. I just remember I sat down one time in my apartment, and I was like, what if I just self-harm? And it's interesting because I never thought I would ever get to that point. And really, when I did it for the first time, what was the hardest part to accept was that it worked, and it worked well for me. And I think that was the point where I was like, oh, I can use this.
What do you mean by it worked for you? What did it do for you?
Yeah. So right after I cut for the first time, the thoughts instantly went away, like just vanished on a dime. And I don't know why, I don't know how. What I always thought was, it was as if it was like the justification, right? So it's like, I put myself in this position. I have these thoughts, I have anxiety, depression, all these different things. And if I just do that, if I feel the endorphins from it, it justifies it. It's the equalizer, essentially. And that's what happened. The thoughts just immediately went away. And I would always wait for it to build up. And I think that was part of the problem, is that when I decided to deal with it, it was already bottled up for, it could be a couple days, or it could be a really bad day or a really bad hour. And so that was the beginning of it. And, it was something where it was on and off. So like I said, I would wait for it to build up. There were some times where I could go a couple months without it. And then there was also times where, it was more often. And so it was always this relationship of, I'm always in control, but this time I'll do it. And then I won't do it the next time. I remember one of the things that I wrote was, my favorite lie is, this is the last time. And I repeated that enough so many times where I was like, what's the point of even saying it anymore? And so it was, and I think one part that was, the most alarming was, I remember I had a really good day at work, and it was a weekend. Or it was Friday. So I was heading home, and I was like, oh, this is perfect. It was a bright skies, no clouds in the skies. Like, it was a great day. And I remember I was listening to worship music, and I just had this thought where I was like, well, what if you just self-harmed? And it's always been a coping mechanism up until this point. I was like, what if you just did it? And I was like, what? And it's like, yeah, like and I'm not like, this is not like a schizophrenic moment. It's like this is like the urge. It's like, I wasn't having this full conversation, but it was as if those urges were like, yeah, just do it. Like, it felt good and you missed it, just do it. And I was like, whoa, this is different. This is like, now it's becoming like, I need to have it instead of using it as a way to cope. as bad as coping strategy that is. But that became very hard. And I think that was a really good thing for me, because I was even more cautious of it, of when those urges happened. And that was kind of towards when I was like, okay, this can't go on any further. And so I had that thought, and it shook me up, because I never thought that I would experience it that way.
Yeah. And also during this time, you were dealing with suicide ideation as well. What was that like for you?
Yeah, that was tough. I never really had a plan. So I never ended up writing a note or this day is going to be it. But it was always in the back of my mind. Sometimes even like a plan B, where it's like, hey, you can do these couple months, and then like if it goes bad, or if you ever hit this point, then we can entertain it. And I think having it in my pocket was a dangerous game. And it was one of those. I think the biggest wake up call for me was on my drive home. There's about probably a couple hundred feet straight away, and in between that, so there's a turn, and then there's like about a couple hundred feet of straight, and then there's a light in the middle of that, and then there's another turn. And I just remember I was like, I can just floor my car. And there was a electric pole, like a huge wooden electric pole at the end. And I was like, if it ever just gets too much, like maybe that could be it. And I think one of the saddest thoughts that I had, that it's just interesting to look back. But I think one of the saddest thoughts I ever had was, I remember I was like, if I do that, if I drive my car into that pole, the good thing is that there's a fire department that's only like 15 feet away. And so like in my mind, I was like, oh, they only have to go like 20 feet, and then they take care of, the person that's a mess in the car, and they can just go back to, playing games or whatever they're doing. Like in my mind, that was like, I was doing them a favor. And so it's just such it's a interesting thing where it's like, even in those thoughts, it's like, I very much cared for other people. And like, I was looking at other ways where I was like, even though I was like, that wouldn't have been beneficial. Like, how much like trauma that would have been on them to do that. And it's like, but no, in my mind, I was like, oh, like that's quick work for them. And so that's when I was like, that's tough. And then I think what also was a lot of it for a good 4 to 6 months was just every day, just God, please take me. I can't do this myself. I don't ever want to cause that on my parents, on my friends. But I can't do this. And so like, just have someone swerve my way. Like just say, move your finger, then maybe someone hit, just whatever it was. I know I don't mean to laugh, but, I know just however way it was, I was like, you need to do this. I can't. And I think that's, I don't want to say inadvertently, but I think that was one of the ways where God was showing up, when I just didn't realize. Where he was like, no, we're like, I'm not gonna, because I firmly believe that he knows the depths of which we need to go, for us to experience his grace. And everyone looks different. And for me, it was in that pit of like, hey, like, just bail me out, God. Just please take me. And now looking back, it's like, that kills me. Like that, no pun intended, but I was like, that hurts. And so I was like that, cause like, just imagine, like, that's a loving father. And I'm like, that's like, we're his sons. And so saying that to you, like, I could not imagine ever saying that to my dad right now. And so that was the start of the process of like, hey, whatever we need to do, we need to get you back home. You can't be here in this environment any longer. Like it's a ticking time bomb now. And that started the process of going back home.
Yeah. So that was the turning point. So what was the journey out from that point?
Yeah, that was hard. Because for me, so I have outside of family, I have three best friends that I'd absolutely die for. And 2 of them were there. And then 1 was back home, childhood friend. But I didn't want to leave them, the ones that I made in Alabama. And so but we have a group chat. And so I just remember I hit absolute rock bottom. And if I didn't do anything, I knew within a couple weeks something, I'm not going to say like I would take my life, but something traumatic was going to happen because I just couldn't handle it anymore. And so I called my parents, said, hey, I need to come back home. And they were open arms, loving. Talked to my brother. He's like, yeah, dude, come back. And so I told my friends, and I was like, hey, I need to tell you something, and they probably saw it coming. I'd be very honest. And we talk about it today, but I don't think they understood the severity of it. But I told them, I said, hey, I'm going to quit my job. I'm going to talk to my boss, put in my 2 weeks. Cause at this point, this was like beginning of October of 2022. And so I was like, I'm putting in my 2 weeks, make it to the end of October, and then I'm going home. And there was also a lot, they're my best friends, but also at the same time, like, I didn't know how they were going to respond, and like they knew, like they were with me, through it all. And so I'll never forget it. So I talked to my boss. I went in, talked to my boss. And so I'll even say this was also something really hard. So even when I was working, my performance was going down. Yeah. Absolutely. And I feel very bad for them. And also there's just a lot of people that were, at risk and even, suffered from my lack of performance. And so, but they were always super, super kind. And I remember I had this really hard meeting the weekend before. So that I was talking to my boss on Monday, and then that Friday, I remember we had to sit down and was like, hey, like, we need to put some things in place because, like, we obviously love you, but, how can we work together through this? And, I remember I was like, I'll think it over the weekend, and then, we can come up with a plan. And I went in and I told my boss, I was like, these are all of my thoughts. This is all that I'm experiencing. And she couldn't have answered any better. And she was like, yep. She's like, can you at least give us 2 weeks to find a replacement? And I was like, I can try. And so I did. But what was the best thing is that my two friends, they replied and said, hey, once you're done talking with your boss, come over to the house. And, one of them's married, with his own house. And so he said, come over to the house, we'll swim, and then we'll play video games and eat and just hang out. And then my other friend, he had the day off from work. And so he goes, hey, let's just eat, we ended up eating at Cracker Barrel. And he goes, hey, let's have a meal. And then, let's go over to our other friend's house. And just the way they responded was not like, dude, tell me everything right now. Or, how could you get here? It's just, hey, let's swim and let's have a meal and let's play video games. And I don't tell them not enough, but that really saved my life that day. Yeah. Just how they responded. And I think that's just, they know me, and that's exactly what I needed. And of course, God knew what I needed.
So you ended up moving back home after a couple of weeks.
Mm-hmm.
Did that fix things, or what happened once you were back home again?
Yeah, I thought it would, but this is actually the part where it's just such a God thing. And so I moved back home, and I just remember I'm living at my parents' house. Again, I even understand that that's such an opportunity. No, not many people get to do that. And so, I wasn't at a position to say otherwise. And so I was like, I just need support, and I don't know what I need, but I need something. And so they're amazing. And so, but still, that, like, first couple weeks, my best friend that all through high school, he was, still in town, and then he was actually leaving a couple months after, up in the state, but up north. And so I got to hang out with him for a little bit. And so it was the same routine. Like, it wasn't, my parents don't drink. And so, I respect that. So I'd go out and, have a couple of drinks, but nothing like too crazy or belligerent. But still kind of just repeating those negative, coping skills that I was still in Alabama with. And then I just remember one day I'm at night so distinctively. I was in bed and I was like, God, what has this come to? Like, I'm back in my parents' house, which is not a shame, but I was like, in my life, I was like, I'm devolving. Like, I'm taking steps back. And so I was like, what is happening? Like, how did I come to a place where I had these suicidal thoughts? How did I come to a place where I was self-harming? I just never thought, and I would venture to guess a lot of people that are in my position now never would have thought they would ever have that. Right. And so I just remember I was crying out, and, this is going to sound crazy, and even I don't know how to explain it, but it was the one and only quote unquote vision that I've had. And it's at night, so I have my eyes closed, listening to the worship music. And I just remember it was like, it was bright. And my eyes are still closed, so I didn't see like in real life, but my eyes are closed. It was bright. And then I just remember there was a shadow, this, light figure, and it was just the outline of it. And I knew it was Jesus. I knew it was Christ. Couldn't see his face, couldn't see any like physical features other just the outline, but it was just pure light. And no words were spoken, and I was just standing there. And he got on a knee, and he put his hands over where I self-harmed, on my thighs. And no words were spoken. And then he stands up, and I was just back in my room. Wow. And at that point on, I was like, it was really powerful. And I was like, what just happened? And then I remember like weeks after that, I didn't have any more self-harm urges. Wow. And I was like, that was one of the coolest experiences I've ever had. And so at that same time, I just remember, so I was still crying. And then I don't know if it was before that or after that, but within the same week, I just heard God just say, just give me 1 week. Just give me 1 week. Read the Bible every single day. Worship, listen to worship music and pray, and just give me, like, you don't have a job right now. So I just want you to give me everyththing you have for 1 week. And I was like, okay. And so I was like, that's the least I can do after after spending, 6 months asking you to take my life. I was like, I guess I can. And so I did. And I will say I've never had a faith like that ever in my life. And there were some times, like even when I went to college, after coming back home. So after dealing with the anxiety, I went off to college. Like even there, like I joined a church and I was part of their like college group for a year, and I had, high highs. But this was like, I just knew, like I knew God and I was known by him, and, it changed everything. And so I remember right there, after that week, he's like, okay, he's like, I want you to write about your experience. And I was like, okay. And he's like, take your time. Cause my plan was I was going to go home, for a couple months and then head out, do whatever else I was going to do. And he's like, no. He's like, I have better plans for you. You're going to write about this. You're going to tell your story, and you're going to, reach. So it was interesting. He put on my heart a group of people, didn't know their names, didn't know their ages, didn't even know how many. It was just a group of people. And he said, I want you to reach them. And I was like, okay. I was like, let's go. And like, this was me like talking not back and forth to God, but I was like, all right, God. I was like, how? I don't have social media. I'm a very reserved guy. It's like, I have 3 best friends that I have. And then outside of family, and I don't have social media, except for like YouTube. I had TikTok at the time, but it was like one of those like users 59325, whatever it is. And so really I had no platform. Right. And he goes, basically find a way. And I was like, okay, I guess from that, I was like, I will. And so that really started the whole journey. So that was, beginning of 2023, really just spent that whole year, writing. And just putting together these words words I never would have thought. I don't think of myself as a creative person, as a talented author or writer, but it's just words that I never thought. And so I remember just sitting down and said, okay, God, I'm going to do this with you. Give me the words. I was like, I don't know where to start. And so by that process, And so I think that's kind of the direction he wants me to go.
So what does life look like for you now? Like, do you still have to deal with the urges for self-harm and suicide ideation? Are you still dealing with anxiety, or is that kind of all in the past?
Yeah, I think right now it's more so the social anxiety has come back. It was a while. It was gone for a while, and then I could feel it come back. And then self-harm urges pop up every once in a while, but very rarely. But right now it's a lot of suicidal thoughts, in the sense of, it's interesting. So I was having a conversation with my friend the other day, and I can tell, so there's always a fine line, right? Where I don't know what is spiritual. I don't know what is, chemical, what is physical, etc. And, I will never point to one person and say, you have, it's because of this, or, the whole cliche of you just need to pray more. Yeah. I don't know what your circumstance is, but for me, I could just feel it where, as I was writing and I knew, like, I just know that's the direction God wants me to go. And so as I've been doing that, a lot of my suicidal thoughts now are not of just take me away, but it's a lot of like I just want to be with you, God. Like I'm just so tired. Like, I don't want to be here anymore. And a lot of that is because of the depression and anxiety. And there's just a lot of moments of dread where it's like I don't know if I can make it through the night. It's like just take. I just want to be with you. I want to stop with this temptation. I want to stop with this urges. I just want to be with you. And it's like I can just tell now that I've been walking with God so strongly, where it's like it's just the enemy, where it's like just those little whispers. It's like, oh, but you can be with God if you do this. Like just maybe think about it. And so I think that's kind of more where my like suicidal thoughts lean to. But absolutely, there's some days where it's still waves where it's like I don't even know if I can see the morning.
Yeah. And in this place of walking so much more closely with God and using the gifts he's given you for him and writing to reach out to people, how does your faith help you deal with those thoughts, those temptations?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a really good question. I think the best thing is that it's definitely grown. Like I've gotten a lot closer to God because of it, which can seem counterintuitive. But the reason why is just because one, I've seen him, just the way he got me out of that situation beforehand and then to where I am now back at home. I know he's going to show up, and I know if I lean on him, he's going to make a way. And so there's a lot of trust in him. There's a lot of faith in him that I know if I just lean on him. And sometimes it's hey God, I need help, and that's the only words I say. And it's like, please help me. Some nights are more elaborate where I can kind of have this conversation with him and go into, and so I just think finding ways of what that looks like. But really it taught me how to fight well and really how to struggle well or suffer well with God. Through it all. And really it's just how do I fight? Because for me there's this I struggle with carrying my cross daily, right? This is what we're called to do. And so I'm carrying my cross daily, and then I have a really hard night where it's like I just slip, and it's like where are you, God? Why am I back in this place? And I stall, I fall, and then my cross falls on the ground and I stumble. And what I've noticed is that in time between where you drop your cross and you pick it up again, just the enemy gives everything it has, its whole hand on you. And so for me, I mean, he'll tell me just the sweetest words to keep it on the ground, or, or the sweetest words not to pick it up again, or the worst, most condemning words to keep it out on the ground. And so it's like, how do I navigate that, to where I just, pick up my cross anyways? And so for me, it's more so just how can I do the next Christ-like thing that glorifies God? And whether that's just praying, whether that's just opening my Bible and reading a verse, whether that's, writing, certain things, or reaching out to people like, hey, these are my struggles. Maybe they can help you along the way. And so I just think of finding ways to wrestle with God. And I think a lot of that, when I first heard of that, it was kind of like, you don't wrestle with God. Like you go to him, you're his child, you pay respect. But it's like, no, like if you look at the Bible, a lot of people wrestle with God. I mean, there's the famous one, Jacob, right? Where he physically wrestled with God. But then you also even think of Jesus in the garden before he's about to die, where he said, if you're willing, take this cup from me. And there's a lot of times where I'm just in the thick of it. I'm like, if you're willing, just take me. Just take these thoughts, give me, just let it stop. And then also the end of that verse, which is the most beautiful part, was nevertheless, not my will, but yours be done. And I think that's the most powerful part, where it's like, okay, God, like I know you can take this away if you want to, but you haven't. So let's go. Like, let's rock. And how can I reach the people that you want me to reach? How can I write these writings to get it out, to show that you can still suffer and struggle and wrestle with God and hold a reverence? I think that's super important. So you're not just, giving God the middle finger and cussing him out. It's no, like, how do you say, I need help? Yeah. And also, how do I then glorify you through the suffering? And that builds faith. So it's like, for me now, it's like, I know I can do anything. Like I can go where I want to go, and I can talk to who I want to talk, even though I have those social anxiety struggles and things like that. Or, if one day I get the writings out and people are like, "Oh, like that's terrible." It's like, okay, like it's like, well, I tried, but I think it's just, there's now a faith where it's like, I know God showed up for me and he got me through these times that I never could have anyways. And also at the same time where, again, I want everyone to hear that your struggle is your struggle and that's hard. Cause that's even something that I was talking to my friend about. I was like, I just wish I had anything other than suicidal thoughts. Like why can't my struggle be something else? And he's like, dude, you're still going to be in the same spot regardless of if it's, another mental illness or whatever it may be, right? Physical injury, like you're still going to be suffering the way you're suffering. Yep. And I was like, yeah, you're right. And so it's like, how do I then use that, right? To glorify him. So.
And just as we wrap up, Keola, is there a passage or a verse in the Bible that just really speaks to you or encourages you when you are struggling or even when you're not, that you fall back on?
Yeah, I think there's two that I really tell myself that help me through, and also they're long enough where it kind of takes my attention away from my thoughts and I have to really focus on memorizing them. But the first one is Isaiah 43, 1-3. And I just absolutely love that, where it's like, fear not, for you have been redeemed. I have called you by name. You are mine. And then when you walk through the waters, I'll be with you. When you pass through the rivers, you will not be overwhelmed. And then when you walk through the fires, they will not burn you. The flame will not consume you. And so I think that's just that. And then Psalms 23, just the whole Psalms. And so those two are ones that I really emphasize over. And then there's other small ones where, he's close to the brokenhearted, and near the crushed in spirit. And so, and then I think lastly, my favorite verse that I've been kind of going to is at the end of Luke 7. It's the sinful woman gets forgiveness. And that's when Jesus was walking, and there's a Pharisee named Simon and says, hey, why don't you eat with me in my house? And so Jesus goes in and he's eating. And there's this woman that is just known for she's a sinful woman. She's a sinner. And she knows that Jesus is there. And so she runs back. It's an alabaster flask of oil. And she goes into the house. And immediately she just falls down to Jesus' feet. And she starts weeping. And that's how she cleans his feet. And then wipes it with her hair. And then starts pouring oil on it. And I just love that whole image is really what that's what I feel like. Just when I'm his child at his feet, just saying, Father, I need your help. And I love the fact where at the very end of that verse, he says that, even though her sins are many, she's forgiven, for she loved much. And it says, for those, that are forgiven less, love less. And what I looked after some research is that it's not that she loved is why she was forgiven, but she was forgiven is why she loves. And I think that aspect of it is, I have a lot that I was forgiven for. And so, I have a lot to love. And so how do I show that to those that are hurting? How do I show that to those that are struggling? And how do I just be a voice to those that don't yet have a voice for that?
Keola, thanks so much for sharing your story with us. It's been an honor to hear how God has used you and used your experiences through your life. So yeah, appreciate your openness and your willingness and your vulnerability.
Yeah, thank you for having me on the show.
I hope you've been touched by Keola's story and the way that his darkest struggles have only served to deepen his faith in God. Whether you've been listening as someone who's felt firsthand the weight of depression, self-harm or suicide ideation, or you're the loved one of someone who struggles with them, we hope you've taken something from this conversation. Now, next episode, we're going to be speaking with Erin, a wife and a mother who has dealt with significant anxiety, depression and suicide ideation, leading to multiple hospitalizations and inpatient therapy stays. We want to unpack the guilt that sufferers of mental illness can feel when their struggles also impact those they love. And we'll hear how Erin has learned to navigate this dynamic with her husband, children, and friends. Our heart here at Anxious Faith is to spark conversation and tackle the taboos around mental health in our churches and in our faith communities. Will you help us do that? We'd be grateful if you would consider supporting us, whether by praying for our work, sharing our resources or videos in your circles, or contributing towards our ministry costs. To join us in our mission to open up the conversation around faith and mental health, or to check out our blog and other resources, or to sign up to our mailing list or connect with us on socials, you can head to our website at anxiousfaith.org. The link is down in the description. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next episode.